And a very good morning to you. How you doing? It's Sunday morning. It is June 7th, 2020. And it's a dull and overcast morning in the northwest of the UK. My name is Richie Allen. Hope you've had a good weekend. This is Sunday View. Going to be looking through the papers, listening to the talk shows. You know the drill by now. And as usual, if there's something you'd like to tell me, you can do so through Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter.
It's the BBG, not the BBC. You're listening to the Richie Allen Radio Show, live from Salford in Greater Manchester.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yes. I've had a good weekend thus far. It's been nice and pleasant. Not been sleeping too well last few nights, but I'm not letting it get me down. Nope, I'm not. I'm in good spirits, and it's Sunday, and I love Sunday View. I love chatting to you about what's happening, and in a less formal way. Not that the Richie Allen Radio Show could ever be accused of formality or anything like it, but yes, it's nice and relaxed is Sunday View. Now, I think we'll dive right in and we'll go through the front pages of the newspapers. Before we do that, though, quick couple of good mornings. Good morning to Paul Power and I. Good morning to Sooty there, to Eva Nobody, to John J, to Base Ninja, to Charlotte Binns. How you doing, Charlotte? To Wendy Ruth. How you doing, Wendy? Wendy was moved by Gerald Salente on Thursday. He was in, I don't know. How would you describe the form that he was in? I would say depressed. I would say, not depressed. A lot of people at this stage of the lockdown, a terrible thing, and those who have drawn the analogy to the term lockdown, which is used in correctional institutions in the United States. And I made this point myself. The minute they started using lockdown, I talked about the language. A lot of people are sick and fed up. You know, they can leave their houses, but they can't go very far. There isn't anything to do. Businesses are going down the toilet. And I think that anger and that emotional state that Gerald Salente was in on Thursday, I think a lot of people understand that and can empathise with it. It's affecting me, to be honest. Good morning to Chris Brown. How you doing, Chris? You can drop me a message. Hi to the music maker who's been making bacon in the kitchen this morning and listening to the programme. Hi to Norman as well. To Jason as well. How you doing, Jason? And to Ian Bird, Barry Murtaugh, to Mick, to Auntie Mandy, Draggers and all the Joseph Ferris as well. How you doing, Joseph? It's nice to be in company, isn't it? Right, let's just move on. We'll get straight to the front pages of the papers. I'll go through all of them. Oh, by the way, just in case you don't know, you're a racist. Just thought I'd tell you. Right, The Observer. PM told, dump the rhetoric and plan for a new wave of COVID. Yes, second and third and fourth waves of this virus, this man killer. We have to plan for them. Stop the rhetoric about getting the country back and the economy back on track. No, there are lots of waves of COVID coming down the line. You might or might not know by now that a week tomorrow, which will be the 15th of June, you will not be able to get on a bus or a train or a tram in the UK unless your face is covered. Right, Sunday Times front page, that was The Observer. Jobs bloodbath triggers swifter lockdown easing. Yes, front page of the Times. It says Boris Johnson, signed off new measures to help reopen the economy when he met with the Chancellor Rishi Sunak on Friday. New plans to be unveiled this week will basically lay this out for us. Planning controls will be relaxed so that cafes, pubs, yes, and restaurants can use outside areas. Restrictions on weddings and funerals will go. We're talking tyranny. We're talking tyranny, and nobody will speak about it on the mainstream media. The fact that they could tell people you can't get married. The fact that they would tell people you can't go to funerals. This is tyranny. Over what? Over a virus that might or might not exist? I lean towards, and you know this, that there has been a bit of a nasty strain of a viral infection going around. I had it myself. But they warned of a jobs bloodbath at the cabinet unless restrictions began to ease. That's in the Times. There's a lot in the Times. The former Chancellor, Sajid Javid, has been writing in the Times about racism. The Sunday Telegraph, PM speeds up hospital building to aid economy. That's the front page of the Telegraph. It reports that Johnson has told ministers to start building new hospitals because it'll do two things. It'll improve infrastructure and it'll get people back to work. Sunday Mirror, Maddie suspect gave us toys and sweets. You will, of course, be aware that late last week, the Germans said that they believed that a man who's already in prison might very well be the man responsible for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, the man they're calling Christian B. So the Sunday Mirror says we've got an exclusive, and that is that this guy Christian B gave sweets and toys to children. Okay. He was also convicted of assaulting a senior lady as well. They said that he's a multiple... He's what's the word? What is the term they use to describe a sexual predator who will abuse young, middle-aged and old? There is a term. Help me out here, dear listeners. Tweet it to me. The first one who tweets it to me will win a packet of Tato cheese and onion crisps. The Mail on Sunday. WPC hurt as horse bolts amid mayhem. This is to do with George Floyd protests in London yesterday. At one stage, a horse bolted and threw a female police officer off, and she hurt herself. A lot of talk in the UK this morning on television and radio about these protests and how they seemingly turned a little bit violent towards the end of the day. Sunday Express goes with Brexit. Boris wants to fix unfair Brexit deal. That's the lead story. It claims, does the Sunday Express, that a source close to UK chief negotiator David Frost said that the agreement struck in January was unfair to the UK government. And the UK government doesn't have time to rectify it. Michel Barnier, leading the negotiations for Brussels, has been warned. He's not the referee of talks, but he's just a player as well. So every paper today is covering photographs of protests across the UK. We live in a very, very surreal world. Speaking of protests, by the way, my great and learned friend and sometimes colleague, the wonderful Jean Ann Crowley of great film and stage fame and journalism, was at a protest in Dublin, at the GPO yesterday, and Jean Ann took the megaphone, addressed the crowd very eloquently there, and poured scorn on the raising of the United Nations flag above the GPO, which is a sacrilegious thing to do in Ireland. Brilliant, Jean Ann Crowley. She then crossed the street, did Jean Ann, and I wish you knew her like I knew her, because you could picture it. And she addressed some Black Lives Matters protesters, did Jean Ann. Yes. And while there, she gave them her tuppence worth, her opinion that there is an Orwellian agenda at play, but it isn't exclusively picking on any ethnic group. She gave him what for, did Jean Ann Crowley. Get in there, our kid. And I love that. Absolutely. We'll talk more on that a little bit later on, maybe. By the way, I do want to mention Patrick from Donegal. How you doing, Patrick from Donegal? He was there with his daughter at the GPO in Dublin yesterday, and he met Jean Ann, And Patrick said that he was a regular listener to this radio programme. So Patrick, good morning, mate. Hope all is well with you. And I hope your daughter is hale and hearty this morning, Patrick, in Doon na Knoll, Donegal. There isn't many more beautiful places on planet Earth than the Donegal coast. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Visited Donegal a couple of times over the years when my hometown football team played Finn Harps. Yes, it's beautiful. Keep those tweets coming in. Now, let's move on. We live in a surreal world where a man can be killed in a country a long way away by the police and we can protest it. What's wrong with that, Baldy? Nothing. 'Twas a disgusting thing to see, wasn't it? The video of George face down on the ground in that situation. I don't think anybody enjoyed looking at it. But I was thinking this morning, the globalists, the One World Government Brigade, they must love this. The fact that you've got people protesting around the world about something happening in the United States. Those who would eliminate borders love this because this is what they ultimately want. You know, us to be engaged with what goes on in countries far, far, far away. Us to believe that we have a stake in things that happen in countries far, far, far away. Look at the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haas. We can't allow things go on in other countries that affect us. We have to re-evaluate the notion of sovereignty. They love this. Those who want to change our world for the worse. Anyway, Matt Hancock is the Health Secretary here in the UK. He was on Sophie Ridge on Sunday this morning, of course, on Sky News. And Matt Hancock was asked, first of all, do you believe we are a racist country? Matt, are we?
I don't, but I do think that there's injustice that needs to be tackled. And I've spent my political life fighting for equality and for diversity. And I think that, I think we're one of the most tolerant and open societies in the world, but there's always more that can and must be done, especially to empower people so that they can achieve their potential. It's at the core of my political beliefs, and I think that it's incredibly important. So I think that the substance of what's being said and the arguments made by those who are marching, I think there's a lot to it. I think, thankfully, this is all based in response to events in America rather than here, but we also must continue the drive here for tolerance and genuine equality of opportunity.
Yes, I love the term equality of opportunity. What does it even mean? What it means is ultimately positive discrimination. Everybody has got the opportunity, if they choose to take it, to present themselves as candidates for any position in any walk of life, in any industry. Don't they? We'll come back to equality of opportunity soon enough. So Ridge asks him, okay, Health Secretary, what more can government do then?
Well, I think that it's right across the board that actions needed. It's a core part of the levelling up agenda that this government is committed to. It, of course, starts with education and job opportunities. So it's right across the board. In my area, in health, we see health disparities as well that need to be addressed. And we see disparities in, for instance, even before COVID, disparities in life expectancy. And then this disease has cruelly demonstrated that there's more of an impact on people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds as well. So I think it's something that is important that we all drive forward on, because a truly fair society is one where there's equality of opportunity, and that means giving opportunities. At the absolute core of my political beliefs is that every single person has a contribution to make and something to offer, and it's the responsibility of the state to help them to make the most of that contribution.
What about the makeup of the cabinet that Hancock serves in, the current UK government? Ridge wants to, well, get into that.
How many black people are in the current cabinet?
There's a whole series of people from a black and minority ethnic background. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Home Secretary, to name but two.
The Chancellor and the Home Secretary happen not to be black, as a matter of interest. So he's struggling here. And although this is futile, this is silly, it's patently ridiculous and even insane, it's funny when they don't have a Scooby-Doo and they start backpedaling.
Talking about blacks.
Blacks. I was talking about blacks to Sophie.
I'm talking about black people specifically because I do think it's quite important not to lump everyone from non-white backgrounds together, because obviously Asian people, for example, face prejudice too, but it might be a different prejudice to that faced by black people.
Yes, Asian people face prejudice, but it's a different type of prejudice to the one faced by black people. So how many blacks are in the cabinet?
62%, for example, of GCSE pupils from Indian backgrounds got a strong pass in English and maths. 27% to black Caribbean. You're 3 times as likely to be stopped and searched if you're black than if you're Asian. So that's why...
Hang on a second. That statistic about exam results, what was that again?
Pupils from Indian backgrounds got a strong prejudice too, but it might be a different prejudice to that faced by black people. 62%, for example, of GCSE pupils from Indian backgrounds got a strong pass.
So 62% of GCSE pupils from an Indian background got a strong pass in English.
In English and maths. 27% to black Caribbean.
27% from black Caribbean backgrounds. But what does that even mean? Does it mean that blacks are stupid? No. Less intelligent? No. But what does it mean? Whose fault is that? It's not my fault, is it? Is it your fault?
3 times as likely to be stopped and searched if you're black than if you're Asian. So that's why I was...
Is it the police's fault for stopping black and Afro-Caribbean men and women? Is it their fault that they don't do so well in English? You see, this is soundbite politics. Nobody wants to dig down into it and ask real questions.
I was specifically asking about how many black people there are in the current cabinet.
Well, how many?
The two cabinets I've sat in with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister are the 2 most diverse cabinets I've ever sat in. Right at the top of government, including in the great offices of state, people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. Kwasi Kwarteng was sitting around the cabinet table with me. I think that...
He's not anymore, though. Kwasi Kwarteng. He's searching. You can hear the gears of his brain moving. Kwasi Kwarteng. Yeah, he's not in the cabinet anymore. Okay. Diane Abbott is a Labour politician. He's struggling.
I think that Boris Johnson's got a very good record on this, and it brings people in and listens to a diversity of views, and it's diversity of thought that's the really important thing when you're taking those big decisions.
Keep that in mind. It's diversity of thought that is important when you're making big decisions.
Around the cabinet table.
So actually, are you saying then that people from black backgrounds shouldn't really worry that there isn't a single person from a black background at the current cabinet table because you have diversity of thought?
No, what I'm saying is that the cabinets, the governments that Boris Johnson leads are some of the most diverse in the history of this country. I just was talking about the Minister for Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, who is taking forward this work. She's joined the government recently and been brought in by Boris Johnson. And it's that diversity of thought is absolutely critical and incredibly important for making good decisions.
Diversity of thought. Again, what does that even mean? Isn't it a bit silly, the idea that if you were from, a black background or an Asian background, the idea that you will think differently. You will do. You will have a different outlook on a specific area of domestic policy or foreign policy. Why? Well, because you're black. You must see it differently than I see it. Because you're Asian. Right? Because you're from, from an African background. It's ridiculous. You have a different ethnic background, you think differently, therefore you must have a seat on the board. It's mad, right? So it's 20 minutes past the hour, and some crazy things are happening. And funny, because you've got to laugh. Serena Williams is one of the greatest tennis players ever to play the game, and she is married to a very successful entrepreneur whose name is Alexis Ohanian. I think it's Ohanian, or Ohanian. We'll say Ohanian, right? And Alexis Ohanian is a white guy, married to Serena Williams, and he announced over the weekend his resignation from the board of Reddit, which is a social media company, which he co-founded or helped to found. I'm resigning, he said, and I want the company to replace me with a black candidate. And he implicitly linked his decision to do this with the killing of George Floyd. And bizarrely, Serena Williams, one of the greatest tennis players of all time, male or female, interviewed her own husband about his decision. Have a listen.
When I thought about what those dollars could do for a community that has clearly suffered for far too long, and that I, with my power and my influence and my privilege, want to do something meaningful to start to show a change, to make a better world for Olympia. I wanted to be able to answer that question from her with the clearest conscience, and this was the way to do it.
Why was it important for you to ask for a black candidate to fill your seat?
Yes, good question, Serena. So you want to do it so your daughter will have respect for you. They have a daughter called, was it Olympia? I think they said Olympia, yeah. And my privilege and all the rest of that, Serena says, so why does it have to be a black dude or a black woman then?
That board role, in this case, it's 1 out of 5 board seats.
5 people on the board, right?
Comes with a vote.
You get a vote.
Equal to the other board members in nearly all cases. But that one vote is a chance to stand up for customers who aren't in that room, to stand up for investors who aren't in that room, to stand up for all the stakeholders. And while that does not actually connect to day-to-day operations of a company.
Right, so you've got fuck all responsibility. And you don't really have any sway with how the company operates. It's a non-executive position. It's a bit of window dressing, right?
A company, the CEO still at the end of the day actually runs the company.
So the CEO still runs the company.
They are accountable to the board. And so if there are things about companies that you all really like, the board ends up being a really great leverage point to have change. And if there are things about the company you don't like, that board is a great leverage point to have things that you can change. And so regardless, when I thought about what Reddit, what the tech industry, what business...
Yeah, so the CEO makes all the decisions. What would a black person, as 1/5 of a board, what would they say to the CEO of Reddit? These are the questions you see. So, all right, you give up your position. It's a wonderful bit of virtue signalling, and you want to do it for your daughter. Maybe it's real, maybe he's genuine. What would the black person say to the CEO of Reddit then, which is a social media company? What would you do? How could you bring that diversity of thought? Nobody wants to ask those questions.
Business needed now more than ever was someone who had a position of power, relatively speaking, to be...
Is this going to catch on? Are people around the world in businesses going to voluntarily commit career suicide? Although he's not committing career suicide. Walk off of boards and panels and say, I'm doing this so that I can be replaced by a black person. Is that actually going to happen?
Be able to say, you know what? There are too many white faces around the table. There have been for too long. And
how long is too long?
I founded Reddit 15 years ago. I've basically been on the board for quite some time now. 2013, 14. But this is, look, I had to look inward and really say, what are the things I can do beyond the donation, beyond anything else? But
this isn't about Reddit in particular. This is about taking a stand on such a big company, being a board member, being a co-founder of such a big company, and saying, I feel this way, and I'm making this statement. You have a black daughter, so this probably meant more to you and it touches home.
He has a mixed race daughter, Serena. And don't put words in his mouth.
It's home more to you than, other people can realize.
I can't hear anymore. If you find Alexis Ohanian's balls, please mail them to Serena Williams, Flushing Meadows, New York City. Next time the US Open takes place, which could be 2 or 3 years from now, she'll get them. New balls, please. Christ. Let's hear from some prominent black men in the UK. Why not? It was men this morning on the BBC and Sky. First up, former footballer John Barnes on Sophie Ridge. Is racism a huge problem in the UK, says Sophie?
Well, it hasn't got a problem like the US in terms of black policemen killing black people on the street, as we saw with the George Floyd fiasco. However, in terms of the disenfranchisement of the inner cities, of the black community not being given access to healthcare, social care, jobs, housing, it's exactly the same. But of course, what we are witnessing in the US, which has outraged people, is the visible face of racism. And the visible face of racism in terms of footballers being abused, the George Floyd situation, and the police, it's an obvious and easy thing to be outraged about. We should be equally as outraged the fact that our young black kids in the inner cities aren't being given an education, they're not being given housing, and job promotion possibilities. So it isn't like the US in terms of the violence that we may see, but in terms of how impactful it is negatively on the black community, it's exactly the same.
You've often spoken about the need to speak up for what you describe as the voiceless and to really focus, I guess, on racism that's experienced by underprivileged black communities. Do you think that there's been enough of a focus on that when it comes to the debate on whether the UK is racist?
No, there isn't, because it's about as I said, the visible face of racism, the footballers and the black actors and black singers who may not get Oscars or may not get, Emmys. And of course, from the police perspective, in terms of, people being stopped and being arrested. But for 90%, more than 90% of the black community, they may not come up against that. However, what they do come up against is the fact that their children aren't being given education, they're not being given housing.
Their children are not being given education and not being given housing. And he said this earlier on in the interview. He said the disenfranchisement of young black men, barrier to opportunities, education, housing. That's not true. I don't care where you sit in this racism debate. I don't care what side of the debate you are on. It is simply not true that the opportunity to attend school and the opportunity to attend third level education is not there for black people. That's a whopper of a lie. Now, John's not lying. I believe that John Barnes believes this. And I like John Barnes. Great footballer. Very eloquent man. And to be fair to John, he ordinarily sees the issue of racism as more of a nuanced one than just simple sound bites. I like him. But where's the evidence that black people in inner cities are not given access to education? I don't see any evidence of it. Let's hear a tiny bit more from John, and then I've done my own research on deprivation and access this morning. And what I found will make uncomfortable reading or listening for people who are black and who are convinced that they do live in a country that is institutionally racist. They won't like hearing it, but I'm going to say it anyway.
And access to social care and how big the problem is. So that's why I would like the people...
Access to social care as well, he said. Access to social care is hugely difficult for everybody in this country. Austerity, Cameron, Clegg, 2010, the post-2008 manufactured financial crash, lack of funding. It's not black people who can't get access to care. It's everybody.
People with the platforms. My platform isn't that great anymore. I'm not a footballer anymore, but I have a small platform. And I won't use my platform to say how terrible it is for John Barnes because he can't get a job as a football manager, as much as I do know that is an issue as well.
But John, again, and this pisses me off because he's usually much more cerebral in his approach, John Barnes, much more cerebral. This football manager bullshit.
Platforms. My platform isn't that great anymore. I'm not a footballer anymore, but I have a small platform. And I won't use my platform to say how terrible it is for John Barnes because he can't get a job as a football manager, as much as I do know that is an issue as well. I'd use my platform to talk about.
John Barnes had opportunities to be a football manager at some very, very big football clubs, including Celtic. And not to put too fine a point on it, John was wretched. He wasn't very good. It had nothing to do with with the colour of his skin. It wasn't very good. Most genius football players, and John Barnes is the genius, don't make very good football managers. It's a fact. And John's lack of offers from football clubs now in 2020 are more to do with chairman thinking, Barnsley, yeah, brilliant guy, very smart, not much of a manager. I'm very disappointed that he would equate his lack of opportunities in management to racism. He had the opportunities, he wasn't very good. Right? In my opinion. This is shocking. Let me, I mean, it really is. Because we live, and you know I don't blow my own trumpet. I don't, but the term, I'm pretty convinced that the term post-fact world, I began using it 6 or 7 years ago. It's caught on now. But I've been using it. I used it before I ever heard it. We live in a post-fact world. Facts don't matter. Feelings matter. Experiences matter. Listen back to my interview with Kevin Maxwell, the police officer, last week, the former police officer, who tried to play some games with me and imply that I'm part of the problem because I don't take people's truth. That I would question somebody who says I had an experience of racism. That I should believe it without ever probing into it. Or asking, well, tell me what happened, or maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe it wasn't quite the way you saw it. No! If we say this is the way it is, it's the way it is. If I was born with a big massive dick and a pair of balls, and I say I'm a woman, well, I'm a woman. It's the same thing. I don't get opportunities as a football manager because, well, it's racist. No! Maybe not. Maybe it is. How do I know? It's my job to say, well, maybe not. You're at Celtic, man. Right? Celtic is a massive football club worldwide. You didn't do very well, John. But they gave you the gig. Now, as for black men and women not getting access to education and housing, that's just bullshit. I mean, it is patently bullshit. Here's a study that came out last year. The biggest study of its kind. Last year, BBC, Guardian, all these liberal organisations endorsed it. They wanted to find the most deprived neighbourhoods in England. And the findings were pretty startling. And again, they didn't make particularly good reading for people who want to believe that black people are the most put upon or oppressed people institutionally in the country. The findings of the survey suggest otherwise. Now, I'm not suggesting that black people are not, don't live in hardship, that some black people don't live in very disadvantaged areas or backgrounds. Of course they do. I've never said that black people in this country haven't been or won't won't bump into or rub up against racism. Yes, I'm sure they will. Doesn't mean the country is racist. There are idiots living everywhere. Now, mass study last year, 8 of the 10 most deprived neighbourhoods in England are in Blackpool. Villages in Essex like Jaywick, Liverpool, Middlesbrough. These are the most deprived areas in the country. The government and various academics looking into this ranked nearly 33,000 neighbourhoods and found that in the north of the country and in places where there wouldn't be such a where black people wouldn't be so prominent, suffer more in terms of levels of income, employment, education, health, crime, housing services and their living environment. This was last year. The top 10, Liverpool, Anfield, Liverpool, the number 10 worst in the country. And 8 of the top 10 overall, Blackpool. Let me read you a few statistics. The proportion of neighbourhoods classed as highly deprived. So, Middlesbrough, 48.8% of its neighbourhoods, because Middlesbrough is a big place with lots of neighbourhoods. So that's how they did it. So they looked at London, they looked at Manchester, they looked at Leeds, they looked at Birmingham, and they said, of those big cities, what percentage of their neighbourhoods could be classed as highly deprived? Middlesbrough, 48.8%. Liverpool, 48.7%. Knowsley, 46.9%. Hull, 45.2%. Manchester, 43.3%. Blackpool, 41.5%. Then Birmingham, 41.3%. Burnley, 38.3%. Blackburn, 36.3%. And Hartlepool, the Monkey Hangers football team, they have that mascot. I used to have a little key ring with a monkey with a noose around its neck. And people used to say to me in Spain, because it was somebody in Spain who gave it to me, "What's that, Richie?" I said, "That's Hartlepool, and their mascot is a monkey." And it's a story about how allegedly a monkey was hung from the goal, a real monkey, not a teddy bear or an effigy, but an actual monkey was apparently hung, and it was to do with bad results and superstition, apparently, if I remember rightly. The Monkey Hangers in Hartlepool. So Middlesbrough, Liverpool, Knowsley, Hull, Manchester, Blackpool, Birmingham, Burnley, Blackburn, Hartlepool. Worst. And they measure deprivation by giving a neighbourhood a score based on different measures like the ones I mentioned. Employment, education, health, sickness, disability, so on, so on, so on, so on. So the stats don't bear out that if you're black, you're more likely to be living in deprivation or to be seriously disadvantaged. The evidence is to the contrary. Not to the contrary, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that certain inner cities in London, there aren't problems. Of course there are. Right? But we don't live in a world that has a media. The media is part of the agenda. I've said it before, to convince people, to constantly beat people down with the same messages over and over and over again. We say gaslighting, telling people you're racist. You mightn't think you are, but you are. You are, because you started out as white, so you've got white privilege, and you've got these. This has come from colonial times and pre-colonial times. You've got this in you, whether you know it or not. The media goes along with it. The media is not asking these questions to John Barnes. Well, Jesus, John, in a lot of predominantly white neighbourhoods or white/Asian neighbourhoods, things are pretty shit, John. Right? Clive Myrie is a journalist who works for the BBC. He's a black journalist. He was on the Mar show this morning and he was reviewing the papers. And he first of all compares UK policing with that of the United States, and then he segues off into some very interesting areas. Here's Clive Myrie on Andrew Marr.
Very different, actually, to the response of the American police in a similar situation in cities right across the United States following 12 days of protests over there.
Why do you think, because you've reported on this, are the American police quite so violent?
First of all, it's a minority.
Yeah.
We need to be clear about that, but there is very little oversight, which means that those individual bad apples can move from one police force to another. There are 18,000 across the United States, so there's plenty of opportunity to get work. There is very little oversight, and the police unions are very, very strong and very, very powerful. But the American police see themselves as enforcers of the law. They are that thin blue line between anarchy and chaos and a civil, American normal society. Exactly. Whereas here, it's policing by consent. It's community-led, by and large. Obviously, there are incidents, particularly with stop and search laws and so on, that aggravate and exacerbate particular differences between black suspects and white suspects. But there is that crucial difference in America that they are the last line of defense against anarchy. And as a result, there is a huge militarization of the American police in a way that we simply don't have here. You get the Pentagon selling surplus weaponry off to American police forces. They're tooled up completely. Yeah. And, this is evidenced in the fact that you have 57 police officers resign in solidarity with 2 police officers who were pushed over a 75-year-old man in the middle of the street, caught on camera. Those 57 police officers, you're wondering, why are they resigning in solidarity with that? It's very much us against them, and that's the attitude.
That's very good by Clive Myrie. It's very simplistic to say that racism is rampant in US police forces. It's simplistic in the extreme. There's something else going on there. Hyper-militarization of them. Hiring guys that are extremely aggressive. Sending those who train police officers to Israel to learn how to become police force instructors. This is true. Where do you think the knee on the neck thing came from? It came out of Gaza, came out of Hebron, came out of Tel Aviv, came out of Jerusalem. Very simplistic. It's not to say that some police officers in the US don't harbour feelings about, people from ethnic backgrounds, negative feelings towards them. I'm not saying it doesn't go on. I'm sure it goes on here as well. I'm sure there must be people in uniform in the UK who have private feelings of ambivalence towards black people or Asian people. Obviously, we're human. And to err is to human, right? Is to be human. Let me read a few comments. Too simplistic. Jason got back to me. Richie, the monkey hangers. The monkey was hanged in Hartlepool from the goalpost because they thought it was an enemy Spanish sailor. So the story goes. Cheers, mate, for clearing that one up. I couldn't remember that story for love nor money. Number of you commenting on trans issues because trans women are women is trending on Twitter today. Might come back to that in a few minutes. Susan says, Richie, my grandson was bullied out of a very good school. He had to do an exam to enter. Rather than address the bullying group, they moved him. Kid bullies are all born in UK. Kid bullies all born in the UK. They call themselves the Somali gang, she said. It still hasn't been addressed for these kids for a better future. A gang calling themselves the Somali gang were bullying Susan's grandson, says Susan, and he moved on. Thanks for that, Susan. Steve tweets, inequality is more of a class issue than a racial one, in my opinion, and class in the UK is still an issue in the 21st century, regardless of what politicians try to preach. Thank you, Steve. Good morning. Good morning to Charlie. Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people in cabinet. Ultimately, we live in a predominantly white society. Yes, cities are diverse, but elsewhere in the UK, BAME people are the minority in number. There you will have less of a percentage of them in positions such as police, government, etc., etc. It's not through racism, says Charlie, that you don't see so many people from those backgrounds. It's demographics, says Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Cave Hillbilly says, the Reddit fellow, Alexis Ohanian, surely the high priest of virtue signalers. Do the top 10 again, Richie. Indeed. Mwinga says, Richie, I take it the Richie Allen Show will not be hosted by a black host. Not anytime soon. When I've taken time off in the past, I've just shut the show down. Logistically, it's very difficult for me to get somebody else to present it. And, of course, I'm not just going to let anybody present my radio show. Jesus Christ. And give them my stream and my website, and then they libel somebody or say something, and I've got to pay for it. No, thank you. No, thank you. If I'm going to get done on the airwaves, it'll be me doing me. Right, let's move on. Let's move on. I was going to take a tune, but I won't. I'm going to move on. Also on the Andrew Marr show today was the black historian David Olusoga, right? Andrew Marr says to David Olusoga, what would you say to people, David, who are watching at home, who say, I am not a racist, and I find it very strange to see people protesting for something that happened in America? So that question again, because it's important. Marr said to the black historian David Olusoga, he said, David, there are people at home watching saying, well, I'm not a racist, and I find it very strange that people are protesting here for George Floyd. What did David Olusoga say to the people at home who don't think they're racist.
I'd ask them to listen to the protesters. The protesters are demonstrating, they're on the streets because they see parallels and echoes in their lives, in their experiences, in their relationship with the police, in what's happened to George Floyd. And there's a long tradition of black people in different countries, different parts of the world, joining together at moments like this. So I'd ask people to listen to the protesters, to ask why black people feel this connection when they look at what happened to George Floyd, that they see echoes of their own life, rather than dismiss it.
You're a historian of all of this, and I'd like to ask you for a little bit of historical perspective, because we have periodically, every few years, something erupts. It's the Stephen Lawrence case, it's the Macpherson report, it's Mark Duggan, it's the Windrush scandal, and people say this is a turning point, things are going to change. Have things changed, and if not, why not? And do you think this moment might be different?
Well, the fact that you can list that long, depressing catalogue of landmarks in this history shows that we haven't got to the bottom of the problem. We haven't got to the core of the issue, which is acknowledging what racism is, that it's systemic, that it affects all of us, that it's deeply hardwired into our culture, into our language, into the way we interact with each other. And we've hoped time and again that these moments would be turning points, there'd be landmarks that would begin a new age. And I'm tentative and nervous to say that this might be. But this feels to me slightly different, because what's really struck me all week is that there have been people, black and white, who've been trying to gather new knowledge. People have been buying books, they've been going online, they've been reading, they've been asking, what does racism look like? What does it feel like to non-white people in Britain and in other countries? That thirst for knowledge, that sort of outpouring of empathy and openness, that does feel new to me.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like re-education to me, to be honest. But that's just me. Stephen Hardy is in Hull, and he says he would imagine Hull would be at the bottom, that it would be the worst city in terms of deprivation. I read some statistics out earlier on. Hull doesn't do well. It's near the top of the most deprived places in the country. You know, education and all the rest of it. And 89.7% of the population in Hull is white. 1.1% of the population is South Asian. 1.2% of those living in Hull are black, and 1.3% mixed race. So just don't believe it when people tell you, you know, that people from ethnic minority backgrounds are more disadvantaged than anybody else. It is bullshit. And I'm getting fucking tired. And I'm not going to lose my temper this morning because I'm in good mood. I'm getting tired of this. I'm getting tired of race and race baiting and racial politics and gender politics and sexual politics. I'm getting fucking sick of it, people. Nobody is any more under the gun or the jackboot than anybody else. Geoengineering the planet is a real fucking thing. Do you think that if you're black, you're more susceptible to that? Do you think if you're black, or if you're Asian, or if you're Chinese, that you are more susceptible to the coming forced vaccination agenda? Do you think so? Do you think it's not happening to me? A middle-aged, curmudgeonly, baldy, fucking Irish paddy. Do you think I'm exempt? Because the colour of my skin is white. Do you think that? Look around you. If you're from an ethnic minority and you believe that you're the most oppressed person in the world, and that white people have to acknowledge this, and we have to give up jobs and positions for you. Look around you. Every fucking pub, every business, every coffee shop, every fucking shop in the country was closed down. To who? To who and by who? Well, to who? To me and you. Me and you. We're one, but we're not the same, Bono once sang. He got it wrong, didn't he? Just like Neil Armstrong. The fucking truth is, we're the same, but we're not one. Because if we were one, they couldn't do it. They couldn't lock the fucking country down. They couldn't sell trillions of pounds worth of ammunition to the fucking Saudis to blow women and children to pieces. If we were the same, and we accepted that we're the fucking same, but we're not one. Always got me that song that U2 wrote, one of the most famous songs of all time. We're one but we're not the same. It's about a failed marriage. We get to carry each other. No, it's not that we're one but we're not the same. We're the same but we're not one. We're not united. Squabbling over who the fuck has it worst off. Give me a break. Give me a break. And it's happening on Twitter. It's happening on Instagram. It's happening on fucking Facebook. And nobody's talking. Nobody. Refusing to talk on platforms, refusing to speak on radio shows, refusing to meet on television programs to have grown-up debate about what's going on. That's an agenda. That is the establishment's agenda. Only fucking 6 weeks ago, I had an argument with a doctor in America about vaccines. He got very vexed. I invited him on the radio program. I said, come on, because I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm just, pretty concerned about the fact that some vaccines appear to be doing harm. Come on. And the guy actually said to me, a guy supposed to be an intellectual, he said, I shit you not. He said, what you mean I need to come on your radio show for a debate? We can have a debate on Twitter. And I said, but we fucking can't have a debate on Twitter. Because on Twitter, I get to ignore your questions if I so choose, and you get to ignore mine. So when I point out to you that Bill Gates has ruined the lives of 500 million people in India, when I point out to you that thousands of girls in Ireland were destroyed by fucking Gardasil, you ignore it. Because you're on social media. Because you are a blip on a fucking screen. Just like me. But in face-to-face conversation, in radio debate, you don't get to ignore the points I put to you. You don't. And that's what the system has done. And that's why race baiting and racism and all this fucking lies, this is why it thrives. Because there is no debate. There is no conversation. Oh, we have it worse than you, and you have fucking 16-year-old tennis-playing girls saying if you don't speak out about it, it means that you're on the side of the oppressor. It's a lunatic asylum we live in. They want to reduce the population by 4/5. They want to merge every man, woman and children with technology. They want to prevent you from going from A to B. They want your fucking fridge to rat you out if there's too much fucking red meat in it because it might harm the planet. And you fucking think that the biggest problem you have is that you're oppressed because of the colour of your skin. And worse than that, the far right are they are the mirror image of the momentum fucking crazy lefties who are in favour of this racial equality agenda. The ones on the far right are just as bad. Let's talk about white racism. The real oppressed person is the white man here. You're all a bunch of fucking idiots. And when you're on Twitter and you're screaming at one another about all of this, there's a sound that if you just stop typing. Don't type that message to that black dude calling him a fucking idiot. Just stop. Stop and listen. Listen. What the fuck was that? That was the agenda, son. That was the agenda that's gone right by your fucking eyes while you're arguing over who's the biggest victim. It's insane. And is this real? Yeah, because it's driving me mad. It's driving me so fucking mad I don't even want to come on air. I can't keep talking about this anymore. I can't. It's insane. This is my truth. Well, okay, let's have a chat about it. Let's dig down into it. We'll see what's really going on here. Look at the things that are happening. Mother of God. From tomorrow week, you can't get on a bus without a mask. The next step is they're going to suggest that maybe it's best for everybody who is outdoors to be wearing a mask. That's the next thing. A friend of ours, a very good friend, she's a neighbour, and a good neighbour, and she works in a school. She said it is fucking tyranny. The children are back to school, some of them are, and they are walking down the corridors with their hands held out in front of them, making the prayer sign. Why are they praying? No, it's so that they don't inadvertently touch a fucking hard or smooth surface and leave their germs. This is what they're doing to children. Stick your race-baiting politics up your fucking arse. Because it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm running out of words. Picture that scene. Children walking down the corridor of a school, holding their hands out in front of them so that everybody can see that they're not inadvertently leaving their dirty germs on surfaces for somebody else to encounter by happenstance. What the fuck is going on? Don't talk about that. Don't unite against that. Don't unite about making billions of people unemployed and fucking penniless. Don't unite against that. Let's unite against a poor, unfortunate bastard who was murdered by a stupid fucking cop in America. Let's do that. And let's argue and scream at each other across fucking streets like Muppets. While again, what was that? That's the agenda, son. It's advanced 15 fucking steps while you're arguing with that guy over there. Shouting things at him, and he's shouting things at you. You've got a pair of lungs, you've got a heart, you've got kidneys, you've got balls, or you've got a uterus. All that really separates you really is the colour of your fucking skin. It doesn't matter. It used to matter. Of course it did. Does it matter now? Does it matter now? What are we going to do? What are we going to do when next year that fucking digital health passport is out and you can't avoid having it? You say to yourself, you know, fuck it, I've been listening to Zechariah and to David and to Jim. I've got all this information. I know what's happening here. I won't have it. But you will have it. You will have it. You will. Because life as you know it will be impossible unless you have it. That fucking idiot. Let me play. No, I won't. Will I? No, I won't. I'll leave it till tomorrow. I was going to play you more. I'll play you a little bit more. Hang on. Here's this idiotic black historian, David Olusoga. Mar, I think, asks him a question along the line. I've lost my place now. Along the lines of, what does he want white people to do, or something like that. Here's the question.
In a sense, you've already answered my next question, which is a lot of people will be watching at home and they'll be thinking, but I'm not racist. What do you mean Britain is racist? What should they be doing? How should they be educating themselves? And how should they change their lives to make this a better country for black people to be living in?
I think the big step we have to make is to not see racism just as being the overt racism, racial violence, the use of racial language, open discrimination, and accept that because our history is a history of exploiting and using people from Africa, because racism is deeply hardwired into that history, that it's disfigured our societies, that we have these disadvantages, that we have this language which is loaded with toxins that come from this history. And when black people talk about that, when they talk about the damage it does to them, the psychological damage, we seem to have spent a long time in this country just dismissing that. That's still happening this week. When black people have talked about how powerfully this moment connects with them, they've been told, oh, there's no comparison with America. You're exaggerating. You're drawing a false parallel. Well, that's part of this long habit of not listening to black people.
No, it isn't. It's somebody disagreeing with somebody. Holy Jesus. This is what Kevin Maxwell said to me last Monday. I mean, this is infuriating stuff. This guy is supposed to be intelligent. I mean, he must be, right? He's a history professor. Listen again.
I spent a long time in this country just dismissing that. That's still happening this week. When black people have talked about how powerfully this moment connects with them, they've been told, oh, there's no comparison with America.
There is no comparison with America in the UK. With respect to policing, there is none.
Exaggerating, you're drawing a false parallel. Well, that's part of this long habit of not listening to black people.
Right, so when a black person says the sky is purple with fucking yellow polka dots, we should say, okay. Identity politics. It's the thing that will drown us all. We're finished. There's no getting out of this. This lunacy reigns. Black person says that, I'm protesting because, it's happening here. It isn't. It's meant to. The militarisation of the police and police shooting people for sod all. It's coming. Don't be under any illusion, but it's not happening here at the moment. But if you say that to a black person, you're racist. You're not listening to them because of your racial prejudice. It's fucking mad, isn't it?
To black people about what racism is. So listening. The real revolution of this week is black people and white people coming together and talking about what racism feels like, what it is to black people.
Professor David Olusoga, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Yeah, and Mara says, thanks very much. I'm not going to dig down into any of that, you know. Yeah. Look, we're over time now. I'm going to go. I'm going to go. This is where we were meant to be. I think the agenda hasn't expedited. I don't believe it's ahead. I don't believe it's behind. I think it's where it's meant to be. This is where we're meant to be. While you have things like this happening. I talked about this on Twitter the other day. This is a comedian called Lee Francis, who is better known by some of his alter egos, like Keith Lemon. Ordinarily a very funny guy. He decided, unprovoked as far as I understand, that some characters that he did 10 or 15 years ago, where he took the piss out of celebrities like Mel B and Michael Jackson and Oprah Winfrey and others, he decided that he needed to apologise for that, and here you go.
Hi, my name's Lee Francis. I play a character called Keith Lemon on television. It's been a weird few days. I've sat and thought about things and what I could post to try and help things. Back in 2002, I did a show called Bo Selector. I portrayed many black people. Back then, I didn't think anything about it. People didn't say anything, and I'm not going to blame other people.
People didn't say anything about it at the time.
I'll just keep it on.
Except that it was funny.
Well, I've been talking to some people, and I didn't realise how offensive it was back then. And I just want to apologise. I just want to say sorry for any upset I caused, whether I was Michael Jackson, Craig David, Trisha Goddard, all people that I'm a big fan of. And I guess we're all on a learning journey.
The show was pretty hilarious. I was watching some of it back this morning. He didn't look physically anything like the people he was playing, and that was part of the humour of it. He would wear the clothes, so he had the Michael Jackson red leather suit from Thriller or Beat It. I can't remember which of the videos it was. And it was hilarious. And he would walk around a house that was supposed to be Michael Jackson's house, and he would point to things like a bowl of spoons, and he would say, those are for Uri Geller, because Uri Geller won't come around unless there's a bowl of motherfucking spoons and all this sort of stuff. Hilariously funny. Nobody cared. Nobody does care. But this is what's happening. And while this is going on, and you're locked into it, as everybody is on Twitter, the agenda that we talked about earlier on just goes slowly by. Nothing to see here. It's all fine. You carry on arguing over whether this was racist or that was racist or he's racist or she's racist or who's the worst off or who's not the worst off. Carry on, and we'll keep legislating for things like wearing masks in public, telling children to walk around schools with their hands out in front of them, visors everywhere, forced vaccination, carrying a digital health passport which determines whether or not you can go certain places or see certain things. We'll do all of that, and you carry on killing each other over things that don't matter. We will, as Jean Ann just said to me, dictate your every move, and you'll go along with it. Because it's almost like the system, which isn't hidden, the agenda isn't hidden. It's like, hey guys, we're just going to take away every motherfucking freedom you ever had, right? And you're like, stop bothering me right now. I'm having an argument with a guy in London about knife crime and about blacks being stupid and blacks being violent, and he's having a go back at me. So shush. No, but I want to tell you that we are looting your fucking freedoms. Shut up. I don't want... I'm having an argument with a guy over here about whether a man is really a man or a woman is really a woman. And that's where you are in the year 2020. It's a wonderful world. And I'm going out with this from George Michael and wishing you a wonderful Sunday. Look after yourselves and one another, and we will do it all again tomorrow at 5 o'clock UK time. And astonishingly, I didn't think we'd get him on, but Dr. Vernon Coleman will be on the radio show with me tomorrow. I'm looking forward to meeting him. Lots of interesting people. John Rappaport, Zuby, who's a hugely successful businessman and musician. Garland Nixon in the US. Who else have we got? We've got loads. I'll see you tomorrow. It's bye for me now. Bye. Doesn't matter what fucking colour your skin is.